Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Doctor2Doctor in the chat room. We are so glad to have you guys back. We appreciate you coming back every Saturday to share this hour with us because we cannot do this without you. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Hey, co-host Dr. West, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing today?
Doing pretty good. Wanting everybody to stay safe and use those necessary precautions to stay safe, whatever that means for you. We don't even know what's going around anymore. I've heard of so much stuff I can't even keep up anymore. So just be safe, people.
Right.
You know,
However you do that.
yeah, I was noticing the other day, like it was really cool and, the weather changed from warm and then it went to cool. But one of the things that I noticed was like we've been having a lot of like windy weather. And
Yes.
so I struggle, my allergies and
All
stuff
right.
like that. I struggle really, really bad. I've been wearing that mask, man. That mask has been saving my life. I'm telling y'all, that mask is doing more than just for COVID. I'm telling you now.
Right. I've noticed that too. I don't have allergies, but I've noticed I've not been sick, knock on wood, this entire flu season.
Yeah.
And so I think that's maybe part of it too, is just wearing that mask. So
Yeah. So I'm really excited about our show today because like this person is such a beautiful person inside and out. And I've been asking her for a while about coming to talk to us about her experiences because she's had some really great ones. Okay. And Dr. Nicole, you know how I feel about educators, right? Because
yes, ma'am.
educators, yeah, they make sure they just have this huge positive impact on our lives and
Right.
they make this huge and positive contribution to our society. And truth be told, you pretty much need a teacher for every profession, whether it's something academic or something vocational, right? And being an educator, means that you have an opportunity to see others learn and to see others grow.
Right.
And I just don't think it gets any better than that. Teachers are everything in my book. And then when
like
you have
all the time, you say this all the time, they don't get nearly enough credit. They
no,
really
let's not even start with the pay because I get real angry right there.
Yes.
And so they're everything. And then when you have one like the one that we're going to have the honor of speaking to today, you realize that saying that they're everything really doesn't encompass their true meaning and their true value because this young lady that we're going to be chatting it up with today, she's done everything. She's lived her life and her career outside the box. Okay. Bridgett Arnold is her name. She's a proud graduate of the Memphis City Schools, to which she has returned as a classroom teacher. She has dedicated over 20 years as an educator in various elementary and middle schools across the city of Memphis. She enjoys working with young people in the school system as well as in her church and community. And I have watched her do that. I have watched her grow. She loves to travel and experience new things. And in 2019, she was blessed to have the opportunity to teach overseas in the United Arab Emirates. Emirates. I was for 3 years, which turned out to be an experience that expanded her perspective of the world. So, how awesome is that? We are honored again to have you, and we can't wait to hear more about all of the opportunities that your experiences have afforded you. Welcome, Bridgett.
Thank you, Doctor and Doctor, so much. And thank you for the introduction.
And we are Nicole and Rhonda.
Yes, ma'am.
Nicole and Rhonda. Okay.
Yeah. So
thank you so much for this opportunity.
Sure. We're happy to have you. And just want to start with because I know you were doing this. I was following your journey, right? And I know that you were doing this in the middle of the pandemic. So let's just start there. Like, what was it like? What was life like? The pandemic and then being there.
Okay. Well, I will say I was in I guess, a culture shock at first when I got there. The
Mhm.
first night, I arrived in the airport in Abu Dhabi. I lived in Al Ain, which was a part of Abu Dhabi, but it was maybe an hour and a half drive. And when I exited the plane and the heat hit me, reality kicked in.
Yeah.
I said, "Oh my goodness, what have I gotten myself into?"
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
It's too late. You're here, you have to stand, you have to press forward. So going into this situation, I was a bit nervous. So I made sure, or I tried to reach out to others who were already in the UAE. So that was where social media came into play. I was on Facebook and Googling other African Americans in the UAE, and I was able to connect with a few people. That helped. So
Okay.
through those connections, they were able to give me advice about what life was like, what maybe I needed to bring, how things would be different. And it just kind of creates a community, which
Mm-hmm.
is really important.
Mm-hmm.
So there were other Americans there and Black Americans that a couple of them I connected with through social media. And then when I got there, there was a community of Black Americans. So that made a big difference for all of us
Mm-hmm.
to readjust.
Mm-hmm.
Life over there, um, like I said, at first it was a bit challenging. I think
Mm-hmm.
even with the food for a couple of months, I was reluctant about trying different things. I mean, I went in a grocery store and there was camel next to the steak. You know,
Wow.
I've never seen it in the US, or ostrich meat next to the chicken. You know, it was just, I was snapping pictures of everything. It
But
just
there
blew my
was
mind.
steak in the grocery store and there was chicken in the grocery
Yes.
store.
Yes, just about everything you can get here in the States, they have it. It's a very modern country, especially Dubai. The Emirates of Dubai is, you'll think that you're in America. It's very westernized,
Mm.
even the attire times and the activities. So the area I lived in, Lane, was more, I think, of a family atmosphere. It
Mhm.
was in the desert more, not as many buildings, not a big city. You would have to go to Abu Dhabi or Dubai to really, if you really wanted to, do some things. They had a few things in our lane, but it was a great place to save money because you didn't spend as much on activities. You had to drive on the outskirts to really step up and participate in a lot of activities.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, there was a Black American community and just a community in general. Most of the people that are in the UAE, I think it's about 85% are expats. Only 15%
Hmm.
are the locals. So we work for them.
Okay.
So there's people from all over the world that's working in the UAE.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm. So
So the culture
did you
shock,
ever really wanna were there a couple of times or any times that you wanted to call dad and mom? I have to say dad first because I know you're daddy's girl and I know your dad that you wanted to say, I want to come home.
it was the beginning. When I
Mhm.
first got there, and the heat, it's a different kind of heat. It hit
Mhm.
me, I think the next morning. There was another young lady that arrived the same night that I did, but we were on two different flights and they had signs up to pick us up at the airport. And
Mhm.
so by the time they dropped us off, it was late at night. I didn't know where I was. I couldn't really tell what the community looked like. They just told me to go in and sign some papers, and that was it. So she and I quickly exchanged numbers in the car. We picked up a SIMS card at the airport because the people that I communicate with on social media, they were in different areas. This was just conversations there. So I was like, okay, we're going to find each other. So we exchanged numbers. I went in my flat. They'll say flat instead of apartment.
Mhm.
And they had a couple of goodies like fruit and crackers and then juice, but nothing more, and water. So I know I need groceries. So she and I called each other the next morning and we realized we were in the same complex just around the corner.
Wow.
But thankfully we exchanged numbers because at that point I didn't know who else to call and what to do. And
Mhm.
we got up that morning and we just ventured out. We're going to walk because we could see some buildings across the street. And I'm telling you, with these glasses, when I hit the outside that morning, it was worse. It was fogged up. I couldn't hardly breathe. I said,
Oh my
oh
goodness.
my, again, what have I got myself into? I think I need to go home.
Yeah.
So the beginning was challenging, but I'll go back to the community makes the difference. When you have
Mhm.
other people going through the same experience you're going through
Mhm.
and you lean and depend on each other, that helped. Because after that, this young lady was from Virginia. She also had made connections before coming over there. So both of us connected with our connections. They would pick us up. We didn't have a car, take us to the store, help us get things for our flat. show us around. This is a great place to go. That made the difference, was the community. The Black Americans over there are so helpful when you come in. And not just them. I met people from other countries and cultures who also were supportive. But just the Americans just, rallying around each other, it made a big difference. Even when I had those moments, it created your own family, overseas. Even in the holidays, I know that was my first Thanksgiving. And in UAE, that's their national week where they celebrate the Emirates coming together as one country. And so you have days off, and that is a great time for people to travel. Well, I had planned a trip to Zanzibar with my new friends.
Wow.
Little did I know my passport was going to expire in 5.5 months, and I couldn't get a visa. It has to be 6 months. So the day everybody's talking about where they're going and flying out, I'm just about in tears because I can't go anywhere. Number one, I'm away from home.
Yeah.
And now the people that I've created a family with, they're all leaving. So I went back to my flat. They were all packed up and on their flights, and I had about 4 or 5 days off. And I gave myself, honestly, like a moment to just let those tears go. And I said, get over it. You're over here in another country. Make the most of it. Okay, you lost out on that ticket. That's a lesson you learned. Take advantage of where you are. And at that moment, there's a couple there, husband and wife and their child. They're still in UAE. They called me and said, we heard that you couldn't travel. We're staying. Come have Friendsgiving with us. They invited me over to their house, non-traditional meal, fish, and what do you have? Seafood, macaroni and cheese and everything. I went to dinner with them. And then I said, you know what? I'm going to get up and go on my own. And I booked a safari by myself. I said, I can do this. I'm going to sit in this room, waste this moment, I'll make the most of it. So I booked a safari, and the guy came from Dubai to pick me up. And he made one more stop at this other apartments complex area. And he said, do you know them? We were both Black Americans, all of us. And I said, no, I don't know him. So when they got in the car, the young lady, it was two ladies, and one lady, an older lady, and a young lady, maybe about 19. And when they got in the car, we started talking, and I found out that the lady, the mother, she was best friends with a lady I connected with in Memphis through social media. And she said, I've heard about you. I know you're Bridgett. And so I went to safari with them. We rode the camels and everything. And she said, you know what? Since you didn't get to travel, join us in Dubai. We're going to go to Dubai the next 3 days. So I went with them, booked me a hotel, the time no car, caught the bus, and hung out with them for Dubai for Friendsgiving. And that's when I realized you got to make the most of this experience, Yeah. Things may not go a certain way, but that can happen even at home. Don't lose out or miss out.
Yeah.
So that was a good reality check for me.
I really love that, that idea of things may not be exactly what you want or how you want, but I think you kind of took a step back and thought about like, well, look where I am, look at this beautiful, place, these people that are, connecting with me. It sounds like you were able to develop a really good group of friends or a community.
I did.
Can you tell us a little bit about like what life was like day to day or culturally? I know that you said that 15% of the people there are local. So I was kind of wondering before that about language barriers or just culturally, how different that was for you to adjust to.
Okay. So the great part about it, which I asked some of the people I connected with, is that you don't have to know Arabic. That's their native language. You don't have to know Arabic to work or live over there, because they're really pushing for all of the citizens to learn English. So when we first got there, we went to a mall that was near, I think it was called Al Ain Mall, and there was an Applebee's in the mall. So there are American restaurants there. And when we opened the menu, it was half Arabic, half English. So, a lot of some of the, what do you call them, traffic signs, they may be in Arabic and maybe on the opposite side in English, but you don't have to know Arabic. You'll pick up some of it, but you don't have to know it. They accommodate for English because that's their goal, is for all of the citizens to speak fluent English. So the day-to-day life, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay, good question. Okay, so day-to-day life, it's kind of like here. We got up and we went to work. When I first arrived, they provided transportation for all the employees. So there was a bus that would pick us up. They would travel to each set of complexes. We were spread out throughout the Emirates or the area. So the bus it came to my flat first, which was 6 a.m. in the morning. So I had to get up like 5. And
Wow.
the bus driver would fuss so much. My friend and I, we would come dragging on the bus, and he was speaking in another language, but I knew what he was really saying. And so it would take us an hour to get to school. They made that many stops. So he picked us up at 6. We didn't get to school till like 7:10. That was just picking up everybody and bringing them. So we rode a bus for a good semester. And over Christmas, my friend that lived in the apartments with me, she rented a car because someone visited her from home.
Mhm.
So once she rented that car and got her license, we started, I would ride to school with her. And then she said, you need to just go ahead and get your license too. I was nervous because they have a lot of roundabouts. And I think the only time I've seen roundabouts was in DC,
Mhm.
but the way they just jump out there, I was thinking, I
Mhm.
can't do this, because
Mhm.
they're driving fast. And
Mm-hmm.
so, but she convinced me because she would allow, once I got my license, we would split the cost of renting a car and we
Mhm.
could take turns. So after that, I was fine. I drove the rest of the time there and rented a car, but it took me a couple of months to get adjusted. And so we didn't have to take the bus anymore at that point.
Mhm.
As far as leisure activity, I think just about anything that we have in the States, you can find it in the Emirates.
Okay.
Um, let me see, I want to add.
So
Of
what
course, like I
about when
said,
you were talking about the heat, right? And you were saying
okay.
the heat is so different. How did you adjust to that? I mean, did that just happen with time, or were you told you have to do certain things to make sure that it's not overwhelming? What happened? I know we
I
got
think
about a minute to break. Go ahead.
okay. I think it just happened with time. After a
Mhm.
while, I got used to it. On the inside, because it would be so hot on the outside, the air was a full blast, no matter what building you went into. So I was used to carrying a sweater or cover up to the point that I still do that now. And I
Mhm.
mean, it's hot in the summer, and everybody's like, why do you have a cover up on? I've just gotten adjusted to it
Mm-hmm.
for the air in the building, but also when you go to certain places, certain parts of your body shouldn't show. If you go into a mosque or you visit certain areas, you want to be kind of covered a little bit. So I just got used to keeping some type of little sweater or shawl with me that now I just do that regularly. It's
I
very
would
rare that
love
I
to
don't have
hear
one
more
on.
about that particular adjustment
Mm-hmm.
and
Okay.
some of the things that they expected you guys to do that you didn't have to worry about here.
Okay.
And how you manage that, because I've heard some really horror stories about people going into other countries and not necessarily abiding by the rules of the culture. But let's
Mhm.
talk more. We're going to go to break. We'll be right back in a moment on Doctor in the Chat Room right here on 94.7 FM.
And we're back. Thanks for hanging out with us on Doctor in the Chat Room. We have Miss Bridgett Arnold with us. She is a Memphis City Schools teacher, and we are talking to her today about her experience in the United Arab Emirates, where she was for 3 years. And before break, we were discussing a little bit of just about that cultural adjustment that you had to make. And so you were going to tell us a little bit more about that. Were there things that you had to get used to over there, or that you had to adjust to that we don't typically do here in the States? And tell us a little bit about what some of those things might be and how you made that transition.
I think maybe one of the biggest is like if you go into specific, especially religious places like the mosque,
Mm-hmm.
you should cover.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by cover is like your arms, it shouldn't be much skin out. And when you go in a mosque, your hair should be covered also. And so at the place, my school that I was working at, we didn't have to cover like that, but you had to make sure that your skirts were past your knee. There wasn't a lot of leg. Of course, I kept a shawl or a sweater or jacket on. I've gotten so used to it that I do it now, even back in the States.
Mhm.
One thing is because it's so hot outside, when you go inside of any building, the air is on full blast. So it gets, you get really, really cold. So I always kept a shawl or jacket with me.
Mhm.
And so wearing things like tank tops to work, it needs to be completely buttoned up. Now you don't have to be all the way covered to your wrist, but it just had to be really modest in dress when we were at work. Now, if you're outside of work and you may be hanging out, you're going to dinner, going somewhere to listen to music, it's not as restricted, especially in places like Dubai and Abu Dhabi. If you go to Dubai, probably look a lot like the way people dress in the States. But modesty is still the best policy, because I think when you're not modest, sometimes locals or other people may think a different way about you or question your profession. You
Oh,
understand what I mean?
okay.
So
Sometimes
Dr.
they can
Nicole
do
did
that.
did an Edith Bunker on me right there. Go ahead. Oh, like that.
Said, oh, all right.
Yes.
So I want to know this, and I mean, I was gonna ask this later, but I don't want to forget to ask this. Like, would you do this again? And would you recommend this experience to these young up and coming teachers, educators?
Would I do this again? Yes, I would. I even wished I had the opportunity to do it when I was younger or earlier. And sometimes once you leave a place, you don't realize how much you're going to miss it. I was excited, of course, to come home and see my family and friends. I miss them. But after being here a few months, it's an adjustment. I didn't realize just in those little 3 years that had become home for me. And so coming back to the States, and some things that happen in the States or that are part of day-to-day living wasn't necessarily part of day-to-day living there. And so for younger people, I suggest, yes, try it. Please, even if you don't stay the entire time, go once. I met some Black Americans that's been there 9, 10 years, and a lot of them are saying, I may not be back for a while. They have made it their home. The Middle Eastern area, whether it's in the Emirates or Qatar or somewhere else, they're just traveling and hitting different countries. And there's a community just about everywhere. So you don't feel isolated or feel by yourself.
How would one, say there's a young teacher that's thinking about doing this? How would they get into this? How do they, how do you get started with going overseas to teach?
Okay. Well, I have been wanting to do it for a couple of years, and I first started with trying to apply with the Department of Defense, because I know they have military bases all over the world. But it wasn't working out for me. I've tried a couple of times, it didn't come through. So I just began Googling, trying to figure out how can I do this, and watching things on social media. And I found 2 programs, Teaching Nomad and Teach Away. So, and they're not the only ones, but these are different programs that can connect you to international positions. So once I connected with them and created a profile, then, just upload my resume, my certifications, everything. They'll call you with some questions, like an initial interview, just to see where you stand and different things. And once you get approved from the initial interview, this whole process, then they'll connect you to the major interview. And this is where you actually go interview with presidents or deans of the schools in that particular country. So once I got established with Teach Away, once you get established with them, you also tell them what area you like to work in, what are you looking to do. I had 3 places to go for my grant interview, which was Atlanta, California, I can't remember where in California, and New York. And so since I'm in the South, Atlanta was the closest. So I went to Atlanta, Georgia, and the dean of my school was there. And as a matter of fact, it was there was a actual dean from Ireland, a couple of countries. They were having like an international job fair. So when I was waiting on the dean from my school to interview with him, I actually met and spoke with the dean of Ireland, and he gave me his card. He was like, if this doesn't happen, give me a call. And I don't know what I did with that card. But I went in for my interview, and that's I could tell you that story another day, it would take up, but it was an amazing story that I felt like I knew God was in control the way it happened. But when I got into the conference room with him, I came fully dressed because I was thinking this is an Islamic area. He's a Muslim. I had on stockings. I had a shirt to here. I was buttoned up and tight. And when he came out the conference room, he had on blue jeans and tennis shoes. So here I was adjusting to what I thought his culture was. And here he was saying, I'm going to look Americanized. It was just funny how it happened. So we went into a conference room and we sat down and he interviewed me probably for over an hour. And I was sweating on the inside, just asked me questions about my teaching practices, my beliefs, my strategies. How would I handle this? Why do I want to do this? And he had such a stern look across that table. And I was thinking, this is not going to happen. And then the next thing I know, he looks at me and goes, oh, I know who it was. Another one of the gentlemen from the board walked into the room, and this was an American. And he said, hey, I was about to come and get you and tell you to go ahead and write a contract up for Miss Arnold. And I just seriously started crying at that moment. That was how he told me that he was going to hire me. And I said, are you serious? He said, yes. Drink water, celebrate, drink.
Wow.
So that's how it happened. And from there, once you've been hired, you have to get your degrees and everything attested, sent to Washington, D.C.
Oh, wow.
It's a lot of paperwork that's involved, And so you are paying a fee to get these things done. And then the school gets in contact with you. They talk about your start date. They send you a flight. They let you know what's in the contract, your accommodations, what's being offered. And so that took, I think I got hired in December of 2018. And then that semester, I was just getting everything prepared. And he sent me a flight, and I flew out August of 2019.
So did the children speak Arabic or English?
A lot of them do. They speak Arabic, but the school has been trying to work with them in speaking English. So some of them were decent English speakers, but there were some who did not know a drop of English. So that was challenging.
So walk us through that. Like, what is it like in the classroom trying to teach students that don't speak your language?
Challenging. It is challenging. Thankfully, I was hired for a 5th grade position, but when I got to the school, they had actually hired 3 or 4 of us for the same position. And so they ended up moving us to a 2nd grade. I got a lower grade. So with me having the babies, you just had to implement different strategies like ESL in the States, cards with the words and pictures on them. I even relied on other students to translate sometimes. It's like having an IEP. You had to just improvise with everything. I had to sit with them in a group and maybe read, let's touch the picture, maybe allow them to draw instead of write sentences. And phonics, you had to work on a lot of phonics and phonemic awareness. So there was some growth with them. It makes a difference if the children's parents are also English speakers. So those children who were limited in speaking English, their parents spoke Arabic all the time at home. But those who were speaking better English, their parents also spoke English and Arabic. And then what was amazing with them being so young, when I would meet some of the parents, they would say, oh, he or she taught themselves English on YouTube. The kids would watch cartoons.
Wow.
And the cartoons, they wanted to learn English. So that helped them to learn English and become more fluent. But we also had in the building, I'll say on my team, I taught 2nd grade, and there was an average of 10 to 11 teachers. My entire 3 years, I was the only Black American on the team. I worked with people from Canada, Canadians, South Africans, Fijians, people from, trying to say it, I can't say it, Ireland. It's on the tip of my tongue. It's not Australia, but I'm trying to remember. They have a similar accent to Australians, but I can't think of it. But I was the only Black American on my team for the entire 3 years. And so just about everybody was an expat from another country. But the students also took Islamic. They had an Islamic class. They had an Arabic class. So they were still learning Arabic too. And they had a social studies class just based on their country. And so those teachers were Arabic speaking teachers. So when they came in the classroom with them, they spoke pure Arabic. So I was really in awe of the children because here they are still learning Arabic, taking 3 Arabic classes. But also when I come through the door, I'm teaching in English. So imagine at 7, 6, and 5 years old that they're doing this. And I just think
Amazing. I
that's something
mean,
we
just
really need to push.
absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
You said it became home for you. So did you feel indoctrinated into
The culture.
any part of their culture, whether it been their worship practices, whatever? Did you what about that?
Okay, I'll say this. When before I went, people were saying, hey, you're going to be pressured. You're a Christian. You're going to be pressured to become a Muslim or practice Islamic faith. I never felt that pressure. There are actually churches in the UAE that you can attend. And of course, there are plenty of mosques. And I had people on my team, like I said, from other countries who were also Islamic. So and Lord help me get my memory right. I want to say February or March is when they have Ramadan. I may be off. But they celebrate Ramadan, and that's a time of fasting for those who practice the Islamic faith. And so because we were at the school and our students were Muslims, we couldn't eat during that time out of respect. So even if the smaller children were not fasting, and sometimes half of them would be fasting, half would not. But the teachers were fasting, the teachers who were Muslims. So out of respect, before I got there, I think you just used to cover your window when you ate. But it got to the point now they said no eating during that time. So you had to fast when you were at work. And you could eat when you go home, and that means no water, no drinking of anything because they were fasting. They would get up and maybe have, which I found out later, an early breakfast before the sun rises, and then they fasted until about 6:45 at night. And so I have a friend, she's South African, and she's also Muslim. And after the fast is broken, it's called an iftar. That's when they have this big meal. So they would have iftars in the afternoon. The restaurants, the hotels would have these huge buffet iftars because they've been fasting. She invited me to her house. And so I got a chance to go to an iftar. And so I fasted with them. I got to the point that during Ramadan, I would also just fast the entire month. And I would go to her house and there'd be this big meal. And they cook bunny chow, just different, I tasted all these different types of foods. And when I went to her house, her husband, like I said, they're a Muslim family. He and I sat down and talked about our faiths and our beliefs. There was no pressure of who was right or who was wrong. It was just out of respect. This is what we believe. This is what it is. This is why. And so I really enjoyed that, just sitting down, having this conversation and having a fellowship with them during their time of fasting and gathering. So I think it's something I think about it now, like next year when it's time for Ramadan, will I just want to do it because I've gotten used to doing that? But we fast as Christians, we fast also, but they just really take this on, just head first, and everybody in that country as a Muslim follows this pattern. So that was very interesting. It was really different and interesting, but I enjoyed them inviting me in and being a part of it.
Right.
At first we were like, we can't eat, but after a while we were looking forward to Ramadan.
Earlier, you mentioned being the only Black American on your team. I'm wondering, were your students' parents, were they receptive to you, or did you ever feel any kind of discrimination or racism during your time there?
Okay, so they were receptive, but there were sometimes who would prefer an American teacher, maybe of another persuasion, possibly some would. It maybe got them, I think they had to get a little time to get adjusted to me. Sometimes they may favor a teacher from a particular country. They British teachers or teachers from England, was sometimes pretty popular. But I think after they get to know you and realize that you care about their children, and I'm here to teach, they can be so loving. I know my first year, I said it was an adjustment for everything. And the parents have a big camaraderie. Once they find out their child is in your class, then they create their own little groups, WhatsApp groups, and they have these discussions going on. And so there's always one parent who steps up as a spokesperson to let you know, well, we think this, we think this. So I had to kind of get adjusted to those types of things, respect them, but also remind them that this is my classroom
Mhm.
and I'm the educator here,
Mm.
and so I hear you, but I know what I'm doing within these parameters.
Mhm.
So it's kind of respectfully just setting the tone for it.
Mhm.
And then I got sick one week and I was out for a week. I didn't tell the kids or anything. And the parents emailed me and was like, Miss, they call you Miss Bridgett instead of Miss Arnold. Miss Bridgett, what is wrong? We haven't seen you. The kids are asking. And I said, I'm just a little sick. I didn't tell them what was wrong, but I'll be fine. When I came back to school that week, 8 of the parents, and these were some parents who were tough on me, had bought me like 2 or 3 dozen flowers. They had me of roses. They had a box with it was like a self-care package. They had the masks to sleep in, the house shoes, perfume. They gave me this huge, and I think I still have the box. It was a beautiful box because they just wanted to say they missed me and they hated that I was sick. So the appreciation you would get, I'm gonna be honest, I didn't get this in the US. On
Mhm.
Teachers Appreciation Day, the parents bought me like 5 or 6 dozen roses,
Wow.
in my first year, and I was just shocked. Like they'll just bring gifts if they love you and
they
also the
value their
kids.
teachers.
That's what
Yeah.
it sounds like. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
So it was, you would get kids from other classes walking around the building with chocolates, and they'll say, Miss, I want to share chocolates with you. And you say, what are chocolates for? Oh, my mom graduated from college, so we're sharing oh, my mom had a new baby. So kids will just come or pass out a flower to every teacher in the building, a rose. Miss, I want to bring you a flower. And they're not in your class, but they're just sharing with everybody.
Mhm.
So they do have some very giving hearts. And once they like you or love you, you know,
Yeah.
they take care of you.
We're at another break. This is such a great discussion. We will be right back with Miss Bridgett Arnold right here on Doctor in the Chatroom on 94.7 FM. We'll be back. And we're back on 94.7 FM. I was asking you about the classroom experience and if the children were speaking Arabic and all that, and you were saying you had to, some did, some didn't. How did you, I'm speaking from an educator's perspective now, how did you grade them? How did you how did you measure their, to know whether they had improved, or if they had what is the word I'm looking for? If they had um caught on to a particular
Growth.
concept or skill
Okay.
or whatever. How did you measure that? How did you know how to?
Well, I think it's similar to what we do in the States. Anytime we have a student that has an IEP and we have to make adjustments to how we teach and how we assess,
Mhm.
I had to do the same for them. I did, like I said, rely on some students to translate, but there was a lot of phonics and phonemic awareness teaching for those students who had limited English. And when it came to assessments or activities, I would sit with them. The same thing I would do here with a student who's struggling. I would sit with them more. I would read. I would give them other options to complete a task instead of writing a paragraph. If they can give me good 2 structured sentences, if they can
Mhm.
draw a picture, even if I give them a verbal test, if I can test them verbally and they can understand it. So it was just like having an IEP and putting in those modifications or more time on the assessment as I read with them, or partners or groups. Yes.
So
I'm
it
sorry.
was for real differentiated learning, for real.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Because I mean, we use these buzzwords here in the States, right? But it's not necessarily what's happening. I just know that from being inside the schools. We say that, but we're not necessarily always doing that. I mean, just had a conversation a few days ago about one of my grands that I feel like has gotten a little bit behind, and maybe some of that had to do with the pandemic, but in reading, and that's a concern for me because I feel like you need that for everything, right?
Yes.
And I feel like it's being taught to just the whole group the same way. Like nobody's asking, I wonder how does she really learn, or how does she catch on, or like what should we be doing differently for her, you know? And
Yes.
I realize as an educator how difficult that is to do, and how how much skill you have to have as an educator to be able to walk into a classroom and teach 25 kids in various ways.
Levels.
Yeah.
Yes, it's challenging. It
Mhm.
is challenging. It wasn't an easy task. And then those of us, you know, your friends, you would rely on them for tips and ideas. So what are you doing? What are you doing? It was challenging. And the same, you know, getting the parents more involved, um, you know, to assist at home too. So it was a little bit of everything that we do in the States to
Mhm.
try to make those adjustments for the students.
Yeah.
The students helped out a lot too, pairing them up with students that were
Mm.
English speakers. You know,
Mhm.
they helped out a lot. Say, hey, you're going to be my support teacher, giving them a
Mhm.
little title. You
Yeah.
know, can you translate? Blah, blah, blah. So that helped a lot too. The students made a difference to help with the other students.
Mhm.
Did you have any like preconceived notions before you went over to, you know, a new country? You know how sometimes we have these ideas of how people live or the way they do things, and we might be completely wrong. But did you have any of those ideas before you went over there? And what did you, maybe what's the biggest thing that you've learned
And
about
were they dispelled once you got there?
right? Yeah, yeah.
I think I did. I think I had this whole thing about, to be honest, when I would see Muslims, you know, they were covered and I was thinking, oh my goodness, they're not going to be friendly, to be honest, or they're going to be so stern and this is going to be strict. And I don't know if I'm going to fit in here. It was
Mhm.
a lot that was in place, you know. Um, but when I got there, and I got to know some of the people, you know, nobody is, what's the word, a monolith, you know, no matter what race or culture or belief system you're in. So it's a little bit of everything. But my friend from South Africa, who I talked about again with the iftar, um, she really helped me a lot. And I tell her this all the time. We still talk and message. She would have on her abaya and her shayla, you know, completely covered at work. But when we would hang out or she'd come to my room or when I went to the house, she was playing Mary J. Blige, you know, and we were dancing. And I was like, you know, I said, I know this sounds silly, but I think I just had this preconceived idea about Muslims, maybe because they wear a certain attire, you know, and
Mhm.
Christians, we don't have to necessarily put on a certain
Mhm.
outfit, but you can spot them down the street. So I had this idea, it was kind of buttoned up, you know, and I know, but once I got to be around some of them, I was like, you know, they're just people. That's a part of who they are. That's not just, that's it for them. Like when I see the Shayla and Abaya, there's nothing more. I learned that they're people just like me and they have, you know, different things that they do. They still enjoy life. You
Mhm.
know, they're still human. So I think I realized at that moment I had like this idea of them that was not true. Once you get to know them, we even met a family. I got a chance to travel to Zanzibar. The trip that I missed the first year, I got to go
Yeah.
this year before I came home in, I think it was maybe April. And when we went, we actually met a family from there, natives from the UAE. It was a mother, father, and two children. And we had the best time with them. We just happened to be on the same trip, traveling at the same time. And so the tour guide took us different places every day. So when we got back, they invited us to their house for dinner. So I got to go to their house twice before I left for dinner. We still talk. And she's like, when you come back, come visit us. You know, she gave us a nice gift before we left and they were so much fun and funny. It was just, it helped me to not get caught up in your ideas or prejudices, if that's the way, how we judge people by their, judge the book by its cover, and not take the time to really get to know the person.
Yeah.
So it kind of reminded me of that, like, you'll have an idea. I think we all judge up front. That's a natural thing.
Mhm.
But when you take the time to get to know someone and realize that it's more to them than just that. So yeah, that helped me a lot, reminded me.
Yeah.
What about the teaching part? Is there something you know, learned over there in the classroom that you maybe weren't implementing here that you brought back to the States to teach your kids?
Oh, let's see, the teaching part. Anything in particular that I did there? Um, I think I tried to implement as many concepts that I have strategies that I use in the US over there because of some of the language barriers. I don't know if it's anything in particular. It was an IB school, but I don't know if it's anything completely different that I can think off top. Maybe the language, some words here or there that I call myself learning. I haven't really used them in the class with my students because now I'm teaching a middle school. It's different. But that my students there, they had at a point I had them doing a mantra every morning where they would say, "I can learn, I can read, I'm the greatest." It was different things. So, and they would be so excited to do that. They
That was
sang
new
their
to
national
them,
anthem
right?
at the
That was
morning.
something new to them.
I think it was new to them.
Uh-huh.
And so I love to see them do it. I have little videos where they're actually saying a mantra. I would give each class a different mantra. And they would get up and sing the national anthem every morning, and then we do the mantra every day just to get them excited. They love to dance. That would be our middle celebration when we transition from math to English. I would put on a Go Noodle, and it was the cutest and funniest things. They would want to dance to all these different artists. Miss, I like the Miss, play it again, Miss. And I would just be so tickled. They just love those things. So I don't know if it was any specific strategy. I'm trying to think
But
that
are there
we
things that you learned
incorporated.
about their educational system that you think we could incorporate in our educational system that might help us to be better?
You know, they do, and this could be at any charter or private school, but
Mhm.
this school was a private school.
Mhm.
So they did, like I said, the students we were there to add the English aspect, but they were also learning Arabic. So, and there are some schools, I think, in Shelby County schools that are doing it, but I think it would be great for students to start learning foreign languages very early.
Just
I
about
think
to
that's a
say
plus
that. Mhm.
because
Yeah.
yes, because I can tell you, I felt like an outsider. There were times, like I said, I was the only Black American on my team, and there were people from all different countries. And there were times where I'd be having a conversation with them in English, and it'd be two of them from the same country, and all of a sudden, just abruptly, they would start speaking their native language, and I felt so outside of the circle. And I was like, this is how people feel, in the US if they're not English speakers.
Yep.
And you can't tell people, hey, stop talking because I don't understand. You can't do that.
Mhm.
And I didn't have another language to transition to. So us
Mhm.
Americans, sometimes I would talk to my friends and say, you know what, I wish we had something else or another language we knew that we can flip to like they do, because they would just go eat it out. They're talking to me, boom, and now they're speaking Irish, or boom, they're speaking Afrikaans, it's just that quick, and then they come back to English, and I'm lost at what was going on in that conversation. And I said, man, I wish I had really taken the time to study another language, it's because everybody
I
knew
think
English.
we sometimes we don't have enough confidence in our kids early on because the best time to I think science says the best time to learn these languages is when they're really, really young, right?
Yes.
So we've always, had it where you take Spanish or maybe French, but
Mhm.
we need to incorporate some of these other languages because man, when you're applying for a job and you're bilingual,
Yep.
whoa.
That's it. You can
Stand
write your
out.
own ticket.
Yep.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
That is
I'm
true.
I'm want to know what it was like to live over there in the midst of the pandemic, because you said you got over there August 2019, right?
Yes.
And so the whole world changed just a few months after you had gone to a new country. What
Yes.
what was the pandemic experience
Oh
like
my goodness.
there?
It was funny because, we were dealing with it over there, but we were also trying to keep up with what's happening back home. And you could see the comparison. So I think it was in March, we were going on a spring break. And that's when they said, the pandemic, that's when we just really got to push for it. And they shut everything down. So I didn't finish my first year in person with my students. We went online in March and we finished the year out. And the second year, we were I can't even put the technical term for it, but we had both online classes and students that
Hybrid?
came into the,
Mhm,
thank you, a hybrid in person. And so there would be maybe 10 students in person, and everybody else was online. So that second class, I connected with them, but it was different because the ones in person I knew better. You know, I had time with them. So you have like half a day in person and the rest of the time online, the thing. Or you would pull them online while you're in person with your other students.
mhm.
But it was a complete shutdown. When COVID hit in March and we went home, they had an app set up. You had an app on your phone called the Our Hosting app. And this app kept track of you getting your vaccinations. And so when all you had to show that you were negative within a certain time span, and you showed it on your phone. If you couldn't show that on your phone, you weren't allowed to come into their mall or to their building. You had to wear a mask. It was mandatory. And there were times when they would put a curfew on us as far as going outside. They would say nobody comes out past 8 or 10.
Wow.
They were going to clean the streets and clean places. So it was and you could be fined if you didn't have your mask on. They were very strict. And as I was looking in the US at the time and I saw people protesting about not wearing masks, you don't protest over there. You do what the government tells you to do. So
Wow.
you're not outside saying we're not
So
wearing
with that
masks. That's our
said,
freedom of
Bridget,
sorts of.
so with that said, did the virus spread as much there as what you were saying here?
Um, it did spread. We did. I don't think it was as big because they're a smaller country, but we did. You know, the virus did spread, but there was a difference. Once you tested positive, then you went on quarantine. At one point, when it first happened, they had a whole center, like a convention center or something. You had to leave your flat and go stay there. But
Wow.
after a while, you were able to quarantine inside of your own flat. Um, and so if you got COVID, I'm just going to be transparent. I caught it May, right before I came home. I got COVID. This sounds crazy. One day. And I just traveled out of the country. I came back and it felt like a cold. I was just coughing, and one of my coworkers said, no, maybe you should go get tested because we wore masks. I was washing my hands. It was just everything. And I went to the emergency room and I had just had a negative COVID test. At school, we had to get tested every 2 weeks. When you came back to work, you had to show a negative results to get into the building. So we had a pattern of when to get tested. And this was really the country to go anywhere. Like I said, the app was on the phone. You had to show that to get into the mall, to get into movies, to go anywhere. If your app was not up to date with the negative test, they denied you to come inside. So they would test us at school along with the kids. The kids got tested at school with us too. So when I went to the doctor, she said, I'm just going to give you, she gave me cough medicine, but she said, I'm going to give you a COVID test. She gave it to me and she said, you're positive. It's like, okay. So because I was positive that day, I'll say it's a Wednesday, I had to go to the convention center because that was sectioned off for those people that were positive. There were doctors in there. When I went to the convention center, that doctor saw me. They tested my heart rate, they checked my blood. It was like 2 or 3 hours in there checking for everything. I had a conversation with the doctor, and then they gave me an antibiotic, and they gave me almost the same medicine I received at the hospital. He said, don't take anything until I call you. I went home. He called and he said, go ahead and start taking the antibiotics. Well, the next day, my results came back negative. So I said, okay, that's kind of strange. I got negative results that day. But in order to go back to work, you had to have 2 negative tests. So the next day, I said, okay, and this is just a day apart. That's why I said one day. It was the strangest thing. So the next day, I said, well, I'll go back to the convention center. They called me and said, no, we'll send somebody to your flat. They sent someone to my flat in a hazmat suit and gave me the COVID test. I didn't have to leave. He left. It came back negative again. So once I got 2 negatives, I was able to go back to work. But you had to show that you had 2 negatives. So I don't know if that was a false positive because it was there, it was all back to back within 3 days of being sick. So they were more, they had a good handle on how to handle COVID to me. They were able to control it more. you know, and they set certain standards. You got to show this. You can't come in. And so when I got to the States and I'm hearing people say, well, you know, when she tests positive, just quarantine 5 days and that's it. Like you don't have to come back with negative results. But over there you
Right.
had to
Mm-hmm.
in order to move out. So they got a better handle. And you wore your mask.
Mm-hmm.
You were not going to get in places or you will get fined. So you got used to it.
Can
It
you
was
just take
required and we did
about
it.
can you take about 30 seconds because we're totally at the end and we thank you so much. This was really good. Like, will you take about 30
you.
seconds and just give us some final thoughts about your experience and what you might want to say to others?
I would say for anybody who's thought about it, it doesn't have to be the United Arab Emirates, but wherever you think that you want to go, um, and you're afraid, which I was, to be honest, I was so afraid.
Mhm.
But as I heard someone say once before, just do it afraid. I know God is not giving us a spirit of fear, but it did come over me. But I just did it afraid. I jumped and I went. And you have those up and down moments, you know, like, what am I doing? Why am I here? What's this and that? But I just think you'll be a better person. The experience, nobody can take that from you.
Yeah.
Even if you just stay a year, just to experience it, to get to meet people I wouldn't typically run into on a day-to-day basis and still have connections with some of them in other countries. That blows my mind when I think about it, you know.
Yeah.
Was it perfect? No. But no place is perfect. Even if I was at home or here those 3 years, there would be issues. But I just the opportunity, you don't get that too often. So if you can do it, jump in. You never know. I came back, but there are others who are still there. There are people who found their husbands and wives over there. They created a whole family and they're traveling from country to country. So everybody's story is different. You don't know where your story will be, but you gotta first just jump. You gotta do.
Thank you so much again. And we hope you'll come back and talk to us. I hate that we didn't get to hear more about some of those activities that you did. I was following you on Facebook and it just looked like a load of fun to me. So I hope we get to hear about those in the future. But in the meantime, we want to see you guys back here next Saturday, same chat channel, same chat time, right here on Doctor2Doctor in the chat room on 94.7 FM. We will see you then.
All right.